Buccaneers and Texans in H-Town. Opened 2.5. Immediately opened 2.5, 40. Went down to 2 and down to 38.5. Now, I think you and I both love the Panthers today in this spot against H-Town. Bryce Young gets his first win as a starting quarterback. Carolina gets their first win of the year. So not exactly aesthetically pleasing to the eye, but Carolina gets a win, and it comes at Houston's expense. And the Texans felt like that team that I didn't have a lot of expectations for coming into the year. Obviously, they had the 2 and 3 pick with C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson out of Alabama. But I think Houston is still who we thought they were going to be.
Right.
Even though they had some nice wins earlier in the year. And now they're going to be favored against the Buccaneers, who not great recently with Baker Mayfield, but they can play defense. Boy, we saw an ugly, low-scoring affair. I can understand why this total has already dropped down to 38.5.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Houston, I thought off the bye, sometimes you come out energized and sometimes you come out flat.
Yep.
Like, I felt like Houston, even though they were just 3 and 3, like they had some really positive momentum. And when you have that, that's the worst time to have a bye week. You want to keep playing when you have that, and it just kind of stalled their momentum. And that's one of the reasons I did like Carolina today. If you look at the stats, this was not a pretty game. 229 yards for the Texans and just 224 for Carolina. And it was a pretty even game. Carolina just had the ball last, and Eddie Pinheiro was able to kick that winning field goal.
Mm-hmm.
But I think bettors probably are going to look at this number and maybe come in a little bit on Tampa Bay because they're going to see, well, Tampa only lost by 6 in Buffalo, but we know that was a backdoor.
Absolutely.
And we know that I think it was like a half the quarter, the fourth quarter, and they had a ton of penalties on that drive given to them. I think the Bills, let's see, they had them on 4th and 10. I'm just looking through this.
It's like 3 4th downs and a defensive penalty.
Yeah, they had an illegal contact penalty, and then they had a face mask. And then it was 4th and 10 from the 24, and Mayfield finds Evans for the touchdown. So that's why Tampa Bay got in that backdoor against Buffalo. If you watch that game, they weren't really in the game.
No, they weren't. And
they were out-yarded by 125 yards. They just, looked kind of sloppy, looked kind of out of kilter, and somehow they got the cover, though, and that happens.
So the Buccaneers feel like, because I think everybody in the NFC South, with the exception of Carolina, feels like they're still live in the division.
Yes.
This is one of those games that the Buccaneers, they would have to
They got to feel like they should win, but
right?
I think the Texans feel the same way. And look, the Texans lost to, what I had power rated as the worst team in the league, and they probably still are, even though they got the win. They lost to Carolina. So are a lot of people, bettors, sometimes are victims of betting what they see last?
Mm-hmm.
And are they really going to want to come in on Houston as a home favorite after they lost to Carolina? And, there were a lot of people. I think that was one of the consensuses, I believe, in the Circa Million contest was Houston was in the top 5. Like, people were willing to lay this team on the road. And now you're going to see those same people like, yeah, I don't know if I want to lay them as a small home favorite of less than a field goal, but I think that might be the time to come in. One man's trash is another man's treasure, and that's where you scoop it up. I kind of make the analogy of sometimes you will see people in the sports books that look down a little bit. I remember somebody told my dad, always look down, Reynolds, you might find some money. And it reminds me of people that will kind of look around at some of the tickets that are left off the table and see if somebody left a winner or if they thought it was a loser, and then, then it's a winner, and then they come back and the ticket's gone because somebody looked at it. That might be a little bit about betting the Texans next week, to kind of look at them and say, hey, somebody left this ticket behind, and maybe I'll end up cashing a winner here.
Because I think DeMeco Ryans, you could put him in the Coach of the Year conversation, right? Depending on how you viewed Houston at the beginning of the year.
He's changing the culture down there,
right?
And I think that they absolutely needed it. This is not an overwhelmingly talented Houston team by any stretch. I think they got a quarterback that could perhaps be something, and their offense actually going into the day, I think it was 11th in DVOA. The defense 21st. That's not great, but it can get better. You have a defensive-minded coach. You just got to get some talent on that side of the ball. And they were 6 on special teams, which special teams is often the time I think the teams with the good special teams are the ones that eventually win and win big in this league. And if you're, because that's more like that's attention to detail. And I think DeMeco Ryans and this new staff clearly has it. So, he brought some guys on the offensive staff from Kyle Shanahan's group in San Francisco. And we know that that's a pretty well-coached and well-disciplined group, and they run a good ship out there. But Texans, at least to me, would be at first glance where I would go here. But I think you can wait because I think this number will drop, and you can maybe lay a small money line. Now, if you like Tampa Bay, like we talked about earlier, and we talk about every week because these things keep cashing more often than not, when you can tease up an underdog through 3 and 7, you have a total that's going to be like this at about 38.5, more often than not, you're cashing tickets, and we saw it today.
Yeah, that would be my advice as well. If you can still find those 2.5s out there, tease that over 8. If you can still get that, but it is dropped down to 2 right now, which put it right at 8. And again, a low total of 38.5.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.